And welcome to another episode of 50 Shades of Grey, where I am joined by Camila, who is a friend of mine that I've invited on the show, and I've been chasing after to come on the show, obviously, not chasing after her, to come on the show for quite a while. So we met back in January, Camila, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, and we've been discussing this for a long time. But thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And the reason I wanted to get you on stage is because we share a lot in common to start with, but I think you'd be an interest to a lot of the people that follow me, just because of what you do, your journey, and we have one thing in common as well, which I could share with everyone, is we've both been on a reality TV show. So, Camila, do you want to say a bit about yours?
So most people that watch this might remember the villa, but a lot of people, younger generations than us, wouldn't remember the villa, right? Correct? So your son would have no idea. 2002, something like that. We're talking like 20 years ago. I was 23 and it was a Sky One show that was, do you know what? The concept was brilliant because it was about a computer match. So you were computer matched with somebody else and you go into the house, a beautiful villa in Mallorca. So a bit like the original Love Island. And we didn't know who our match was. But they've taken our data, they've put it into a computer, and allegedly we matched with one of these people by at least 85%, 90%. And you find out at the end of the week who your match is. And I made lots of friends, but I didn't make any romantic connections. But it was great. It was a great show because the difference between the shows that they do now is we didn't have 24/7 surveillance, so we could pretty much do what we wanted, really.
So how many couples were in there? Not couples, but how many men, how many women?
4 men, 4 women, 3 normal people, very normal people vibes. It was not beautiful people of a certain, I feel like there's a bar now for people on dating shows. Like everyone has to be perfection. I just last night watched a bit of I Kissed a Girl. So it was the gay version for women of a bit like Love Island. And everybody's perfect, everybody's so then you know what it's like Love Island. I haven't seen it for about 5 years, but I just and even my mum, your dad, I think everybody was a certain aesthetic pleasing image to people. But I feel like the villa, it was
I must have slipped through the net on that one.
Chuck a bunch of normal people in a house together and see what happens.
Wait, okay, so when you say normal people, what was you doing around this time?
I was the token model girl.
Oh, okay, so normal people, but you were the model.
I think there was a kind of narrative for everybody. I still think they have a narrative of who's a kind of representing what. But they tried to guide us in certain directions. So I saw you talking about this the other day on one of your other pods. And they tried to guide us in certain directions with how we were going to behave, and the setup of do you fancy people, and but I was adamant that the other women were going to like me and praise me. So we just made a pact that we weren't going to say anything negative about each other with me and the other women, and we all lived by that. A couple of the men said a couple of rude things about me, but but the women were fine.
Which was what? What did they say?
I think you have to portray something. So I came across as quite boring. I think boring and bland because I and kind of up myself maybe. But I knew that I didn't want to come across as. I think that you fall into a category. I think on that show, you're even going to come across as a bit of a black part or whatever they want to call it back in the day, or you're going to come across as, I didn't want to come across as the bitch, so for me to come across as a bit as slightly boring on it, that was fine with that. And they said to us one day, listen, this is really boring, this episode, this is really bad, we're not going to air it if you don't juice things up a bit. And I was like, good, like I get a free holiday, I'm not too concerned with whether or not they're going to air it. They did air it, but yeah, they did try to get us to juice up the show a bit, I remember.
Because I knew that I knew that you'd been on it, and I didn't remember it, but everyone that I'd spoke to, obviously my age group, everyone remembers it. And it was, but I can imagine then it was a lot more of a, there's a load of alcohol, there's a villa, go have some fun, we're going to film it, which I think now, like, it's completely different now, obviously.
Yeah.
Ours was, which what I didn't get with ours, it was completely no alcohol, which I completely understand. I've got no problem with that at all.
I
Nothing.
didn't know that.
Yeah, but what I didn't get, and I kept saying to them, was I think it's great that you can show people having a good time that aren't drinking, but they gave you like non-alcoholic alcohol, so it made it look like you were drinking. And that makes no sense to me. I thought, wouldn't it be nicer just to say, like, you know, no one is drinking in here? And I think it's the same on Love Island as well. I think they're allowed like one drink, but we only had one day off, essentially, without cameras.
Encouraged to drink on the villa.
Yeah. Well, I think that, as I understand on Love Island, I think that was the case when Love Island first started. But I think then it opens too many doors to sort of complaints.
Yeah, ours was the typical kind of 18 to 30s holiday. It was a bunch of get drunk, go out on the town. They even filmed us going out on the town into a nightclub once, I think. It wasn't just all stuck in the villa. And I had fun. It was a laugh, but yeah, there was definitely a certain amount of trying to guide us in certain ways, but it was nothing like probably the contracts and the influence that they have over people now on dating shows. So I'm glad I did one.
Yeah, I think from my understanding now, from people that I've spoke to that I've met since the show that have been on other shows, I think they are very almost like scripted in terms of you're playing a character, you just don't know which character it is, and they'll push you in the way that they want it to go. But as I've said before many a times, I think if you're going to put yourself forward for these things, you can't then complain about how you're portrayed or what they do.
They should bring back the villa, because the natural way they did it, it was a lot more, as they call shenanigans. There's a lot more things going on that people would find, juicy or interesting. There's a lot of people falling up and making fools of themselves and sleeping with each other, and it was just every single episode was pretty, it was like a real 1830s holiday. And
but that's kind of what Love Island is, though, right?
Do you not think that too many people on it now are conscious of how they come across, of their Instagram, their reputation?
I do, but I think after doing the show that I did, I've got a completely different outlook on that as I had to previously before doing one. I think the people going in there now, I understand why they're sort of like that way. I really do. And I don't think you can blame them for that, because they're putting themselves in a situation where they're going to play a part. It is a kind of case of what's in it for me kind of thing. They know what ITV are getting out of it. They're getting a show, and they do a great show and they do a great job. But I think for the individuals going in, they've got to be getting something out of it as well, because no one gets paid for these things. There's no money to be made when you're in there. We all had time off work. That was all unpaid. It's not like, I think some of the other shows that are on other channels, I think they get paid, as I understand. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's a great deal. So I think people go in there for the experience.
But the young crowds on Love Island, a lot of them, probably 50% of them, are going to make all their money out of sponsors afterwards, aren't they? And all that kind of.
I think one or two do. I don't think it's a lot. I really don't anymore. I think you'll get the odd one that will sort of do well, and I think a lot of them have got an idea of what they want to do before they go in there, which I completely understand. I think if they're already influencers already, and that works both ways, because I think ITV are only going to choose people that have got a following, because that brings a natural audience anyway. So if they see someone that has got 2 million people following them anyway, that hopefully that I would imagine would translate into 2 million people watching the program. And the more people that watch the program, the more popular it is. So everyone's going to want something out of it. So I do kind of get that now. And I didn't get that before I did this show. I thought exactly what you said. Oh, people are just going in there not to meet people, but to sort of increase their following.
I think with your show, I think what was good about it was people. I think from my understanding, a lot of you were interviewed quite extensively. I think I had one interview for the Villa. You had was it you saw counsellors? Is that right?
Yeah, we did. The interview, the interview to get on it was quite long. But I think, like everything now in every single business, I think there's so many box ticking exercises that you need to do. Whereas, 20, 25 years ago, that wasn't the case. There wasn't all the health and safety regulations and the watchdogs. And, so I think there's got to be so much due diligence on these shows now that you probably didn't have.
I think with you all being a certain age, they could determine that most of you were serious, ready to find a relationship. But I think some dating shows, there's a lot of it is about wanting to find fame or a following or whatever it might be, or just to make money of it, really. And I understand it's just a different bubble in a different world. But even if they didn't bring back the Villa, going on about the Villa again, if they didn't bring it back, I feel like they should rerun it. Old school for people of a certain age. Yeah.
I'd like to actually see it. It'd be interesting to just seeing the different dynamics. Going back to what you just said, I think our show will change now as well. I think it'll be far more entertaining than it was, and I think our show was great to be involved in it, but I think it was very wholesome, but maybe not as entertaining as it could be. But I think it will be now. But I think you'll lose that wholesome aspect of it. I think it will lose that, but it'll be more entertaining. But I think naturally you're going to get people going in now for everything that you just said, for more followers, for trying to get something out of it. That's not a bad thing, because doing this podcast now, it sort of led me on to doing different stuff. And that's only from having experienced something different, really. But I think you'll get that as well, especially with the younger kids that are involved. I think they'll be pushing their parents to go into it for their own devices, like Love Island as well.
Yeah, and you've all come out of it well. I think even the Martin that came across with a few people disliking him, I think he's had redemption somewhat, and I think everybody else you all came across so well, and I think it was nice to see people with that refreshing honesty. I think something I'm learning about, we were going to talk a bit about dating, weren't we? But I think something I'm learning about, which I've absolutely had none of for absolutely years, is vulnerability. And vulnerability I'm learning, is such a superpower. But I think that those shows and people in real life, I think people need it. I think it's just it's an important thing to show people.
So when you say about vulnerability, is that in respect of you're feeling vulnerable, sort of you felt that more getting into midlife, or?
I think I've always been quite closed off. I think I developed more and more as I got older, a lot of thinking that vulnerability meant weakness. And the more I've analysed these subjects through counselling studies or watching TV shows or conversations with other people of a similar age to me, I'm just learning it is a superpower, isn't it? It actually is. I used to think it was a weakness. To be open and be yourself and just show people what actually you're about is refreshing, and it actually takes quite a lot for people to be vulnerable.
One of the reasons that I was really keen to have you on is because obviously on the podcast we talk a lot about dating and give dating experience. I would always say dating experience rather than dating advice. So for yourself, I thought you'd be a great sort of example to people, because you're a single mum, you've got two young girls. I say young, 12, is it?
12 and 9. Yeah.
12 and 9. And as you said already, you're a model. I think stereotypically, probably a lot of other single women would look at someone like yourself and go, well, you've got it easy. You're a mildly attractive woman. And so, you can just go out and take your pick of any of the guys that are out there. So, but that's not, as conversations that we've had, that's not always the case, is it?
I'd say that when you get to 46, you don't necessarily have to pick, because I think not necessarily the men that I would go for want to date a single mum, or they might give you the impression they're fine with it, but necessarily they don't want a long-term relationship with a single mother of kind of youngest children. I think being a certain age, that a lot of men in their 40s, especially if they haven't already had children, they might be looking at younger women that they can have children with. That's fine. I think the single parent thing actually becomes more relevant to me at my age than just being my age, if that makes sense. It's the awareness as well of what that means, and you're bringing into your home, if you're going to introduce anybody to your children, what, you know, who you're bringing into your home, who you're introducing to people. I've been a single mum for actually a really long time. I broke up with their dad when my youngest was 2. So I've been a single mum a really long time, and I've dated other people, but probably for about the last 2 or 3 years I haven't. I've had a very long break from it.
Do you miss dating, or not really now?
It kind of. I saw something the other day which was saying about men move on to somebody else to get over a relationship, and men find somebody else to get over a relationship, and women find themselves. And I think it's really important to be comfortable in being single. Like, I think it's something that I haven't done for this long in my entire dating life, since I was, started dating at 17 or whatever I was. And I think it's something to find yourself, to find your comfortability in being alone, in being comfortable. I've actually got a lot more friends now that I'm single, because I will make more effort to see people.
Yeah.
I will make more do things. I've made more effort to go and study after I broke up with their dad again, and I think I did more not having a partner. And that's interesting. I'm not saying it's a long-term plan, but it's something that is entirely acceptable for every single middle-aged person, especially if you have young children, to take that time out and to just find yourself in your place.
Yeah, I find, and I found when Zach was younger as well, was sometimes by dating other people, it could upset the place that you was in your life anyway, because you can get to where everything's like bubbling along quite happily. You're sort of doing your work. You're taking your kids where they need to go, to the clubs, the schools, and everything else. And it's great having someone in your life, but when it doesn't work out, which a lot of the time in midlife it doesn't, because of all different reasons, it used to send me off kilter, and it used to take me then 2 or 3 months to get back to that routine of being on my own again. So not consciously, but I did find that it was almost like, do you know what? It's kind of almost easier just staying as I am for the while, because nothing's going to upset where I am or change my focus or, upset my daily routine by then bringing something else into it. I don't know if you found that as well.
I think the problem is you can get a little bit addicted to that feeling of knowing that you don't have an extra person to rely on you or to answer to. So I think that it can be a bit concerning to be single maybe for too long, because I've become so used to my habits, my TV viewing in the evening, not having to worry about somebody else in that regard. The idea of then adapting again might be harder a long time down the road.
But so in terms of being single, I know you haven't done them for a while, but did you ever experience the dating sites then?
I have been on many dating sites. I've been on the usual. I haven't been on Tinder.
No, me too.
I've heard about them off friends that, it's whatever floats your boat, I suppose. There's dating sites where people meet couples and things like that. It's each to their own, I guess. I was briefly on something called Raya. Have you heard of that one?
No.
It's the dating app for people that have to get approved.
That's why I've not heard of it.
And I was briefly on there trying to check with people in LA, and I was like, I don't live in LA, but these people are supposed to be so international that, it wasn't me at all. And I've been on the usual, the kind of Hinge and things like that. Yeah, you speak to people. In fact, I've met people. I've had relationships with people from dating apps actually, but just not very often and not recently. But I've been in a relationship with somebody for about a year before that I met from a dating site.
And what's your general? Because again, a lot of the comments that I have from people that message the show. Sorry.
You're trying to get to the ghosting conversation we had, aren't you?
I'm trying to get to the ghosting. Yeah, because we've had this conversation before where your behaviour on you're a ghoster, aren't you? You're one of those people. It just goes missing.
I have a defence for this, right? And you don't.
Yeah, go on.
I only spoke to somebody online, right? So we're talking. I ghost people, yes, but I only ghost people that I've never met. I would never ghost somebody that I've met. I've never ghost somebody that I've been on dates with, that I've been in a relationship with. I think when you've never met somebody, you've had multiple conversations. So, for example, if I join here, I might have 5 or 6 conversations with people that I like back, and you kind of whittle it down, and you get to a point where you might like 2 or 3 people, and a lot of the time I decide I don't actually like any of them enough that I want to date them. And if I've had 2 or 3, you're looking. I've had 2 or 3 or 5 messages for somebody that I've never met. I don't know him anything. I'm not going to go and explain to every single guy that I've chatted to, sorry, I've changed my mind. And sometimes it's just that you start dating somebody else, or, you know.
I get that. But surely if you've had, like, I know what you mean. You haven't met them, so you don't owe them anything. But if you've just engaged in a few lines, what's another sentence saying, actually, this is not for me?
Because I think people take it more personally if you don't just I personally might be more offended if somebody explained to me that I wasn't for them than just disappeared.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
You wouldn't find it annoying?
Actually, no. And I think, like I said, I think if you haven't met somebody, it's different rules, right?
No.
Rejection. And I think that if in the past I may have explained to people that I'm no longer interested in chatting to them, I would have probably lied anyway and said that I'd just started dating somebody, or I've just got back on my ex or something like that. And then some guys, you got to remember, some guys, they don't leave it alone. Some guys will then something, and that's when it gets kind of, they won't necessarily just say, oh, okay, bye, you know.
So here's a question then. If it's happened to you the other way around, where you've been talking to a guy and then you've got a little bit excited thinking, actually, I quite like this guy, and then he's just disappeared.
No, it's never happened. It's happened. Yeah, I would just think it wasn't personal. I think that he's mad, he's bad, you know. No, he's I would just think there's such a long list of reasons why someone might in somebody anymore, and it's very rarely actually about you. It's very rarely about you. I think that of guys on dating apps it's just my formed opinion of them, isn't it? Because I don't actually know them. It's just what my mind's decided to go with, his few pictures, whatever he's decided to go with, and his bit of chat. And maybe the place that I'm in that actually even has nothing to do with his chat or his pictures. It might be the place that I'm in where I've just had a really rough week, and I'm bogged down with worrying about something else that's
I completely agree with you with the dating apps, and that's what I've said to people is they're not personal, and you have to treat it like that as well. You can't take it personally, because otherwise it will drive you entirely nuts. But I do think that when you first experience dating apps, you do take it personally because it's your first experience of it. It's not until like your third or fourth time of having a go at them, because you can only actually sustain a couple of weeks on them anyway before it drives you completely nuts and you delete it and then you wait a while and go back on it again.
I have got tips though for guys. Like, I do think that men shouldn't say things like, too many men say things like, as part of their profile.
Hold on. Let me write this down. Go on.
They write something on their profile like, I'm not vanilla. Like, okay, that might be a conversation you have a bit down the line with a girl, fine. But do not be putting that on your profile page. You'd be amazed how many men write things like that. Your what was the other one I saw recently? It was what's your love language, and a guy had written physical touch. And I just think that those sort of things give girls the ick. Like,
yeah, but it's a stupid question in the first place.
Yeah, I think
what's your love like? Then, if you're going to ask a stupid question, you're going to get an answer. If you're going to say, "What's your love language?"
This is a controversial one, but this is me bigging up the guys that are bald or receding. Right? I'm not saying anything negative about them. Stop trying to put caps on or cut off the top of your head. Just own it. Be Jason Stratham, whatever his name is. Own it. Like there's nothing absolute. There's nothing wrong with a guy receding or being bald. I think some guys, own it and they look great. But I think it just demonstrates an insecurity with every single picture they're hiding the top of their heads. I'd be put off by they're trying to hide the top of their head in every picture, not the fact that he's bald or receding.
Okay, so I'll do both of those. So the guy that said about physical touch, I reckon what's that about? He's saving himself a load of time. He's not looking for a relationship. He just wants to have a bit of fun. So he's probably a guy in his 40s.
Maybe he needs to be a Tinder or hookup site.
Well, he probably is, but he probably tries all of them as well because he's sort of spreading himself, and he's probably put on there that because it's a lot easier because then anyone that contacts him is going to be someone that's like on the same page as him.
Maybe
I'm not saying it's a good thing.
I think the 2 or 3 women I had that conversation with, we were once talking about dating apps. I think they just concurred that it was just a bit of an ick to put it on your profile, that's all.
Yeah, it is. No, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but what I mean is he's probably looking for similar sort of people to him. But this is the problem with dating apps. You've got people at all different junctions all meeting at the same roundabout. And everyone's going round the roundabout and everyone's looking for different things. Some people want to go on a long motorway and some people are only nipping out for a pint of milk, So it just becomes congested with all these people doing different things.
On the subject of your metaphors, I recently watched, you had great praise from Nadia Sawalha and her husband, Mark Adderley, is it?
Yeah.
Did you see that? They did.
No.
I thought if somebody about me like that, I would use this quote. He said that he quoted you quoting and said that you'd taken it to Scorsese level. And he repeated the quote about, you say it, the gunfight of your own doing.
Oh, you're in a gunfight and it's of your own making.
And he praised you for it being the best quote that he'd ever seen in a reality TV show.
Oh, coming from him and his work, I'll put that on my gravestone.
Brilliant.
And that part of a BAFTA nominee as well. That's going on now.
They invited you on their show. You went on their show?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, me and Zach did. They were great, actually. And I follow them both on Instagram. They're great to follow. But they were really good. Obviously, husband and wife, and love their work. And
fans of yours, and I think that they came across. I saw them talking about the show when I was at the same time I was watching it. I post-watched it, and they were just all about the metaphors and the honesty. There was something else about a buffet.
Yeah, I'm I don't know what I say half the time. It just comes out. I tend not to plan it. So coming back to you. So you did bikini modelling in your young 20s. Then you went back into study, and you're a very.
I went from more kind of glamour type based modelling to fashion modelling in my 20s. Yeah, sorry, go on. And then I went into therapy studies in my late 20s.
So that was hypnosis as well? Hypnotherapy.
These skills should be helping me with dating, really, shouldn't they?
Well, the body language. I remember when because we met, didn't we? Like I said, just after Christmas. And when you told me about the body language thing, it freaked me out, and I didn't know where to put my hands or what to do with my legs.
I think body language is is so fascinating. But it's also so obvious. You know, it's just there. Like, if you just start checking two people out like when you watch people, do you ever just look over at a couple or a couple of people? You know, they might be friends or dating, and quite often you can just read so much about if they're interested in each other and if people like each other. I mean, it might be a rapport situation with a meeting or something like that. Mirroring, you know about mirroring?
Yeah.
The people that mirror each other will be having a great rapport. So people sometimes people that have learned NLP will sometimes try to influence a conversation or their likability towards somebody because of the fact that they will purposely mirror the other person. But if you're having a natural rapport, you should actually be mirroring each other naturally anyway. So, for example, the way I'm moving my hand here, you may start mirroring back the same kind of hand movement and same
Not
gesture.
now, not.
It might be like the way someone's flicking their hair, the way they're leaning in. There's all sorts of keys. But like I said, if it's a natural rapport, it happen anyway.